Okay, we're recording. Hi, Tara.
Hey
Um,
Mel.
so, everybody, this is Tara. Many of you probably have seen Tara or met Tara. You've probably seen her on our Facebook Tribe page or heard from her. She is my friend. She's my colleague. Today, she's the head of digital. She's the jack of all trades at Global Sisters. But I wanted to speak to Tara. She has a former life it's a life that she's living at the same time as working with Global Sisters that is really interesting, and I think a lot of our sisters would be really interested in hearing a bit about her story and background with business and the journey she's been on. When I first met Tara at the beginning of the year, I remember thinking she was somebody I instantly felt comfortable with, but also that she had a lot of wisdom to offer. It's one of those people you stand with and you know that they're very humble and unassuming, but that she's got a story to tell. And as I've gotten to know her, I've gotten to know a bit about her story. So I guess my first question to you is, who are you?
Oh wow, that's a biggie, isn't it? I ask myself that in the mirror every morning. I am I'm obviously here at Global Sisters. I'm also a mum, so I have an 18-year-old son and a 7-year-old son. And I am a social person, so I quite love spending time with people. But I've also been a business owner now for coming up to 8 years. So my very first business was actually 12 years ago, and it was a consultancy business. I spent about a decade as a CEO of a national not-for-profit, and on the back of leaving that role, I worked in consulting for quite a while, still in the same sort of ecotourism and natural resource management space. But then 8 years ago, I started a business called The Baby Diaries, which is a tech business, which is really funny because I literally have the tech skills that would fit on the outside of a corn kernel, or I certainly did at 8 years ago. So
you say that, you say that, but you did help set up this video. So
I did help set up the video. Well, it's been a very steep learning curve, just put it that way. So yeah, I started a tech company with no tech skills, no money, and a 3-month-old baby, and I was a sole mum. So it was certainly an interesting time.
Yeah, and I guess that's what I really wanted to talk to you about, that it blows my mind. I've got 2 young kids. I hear your story and think about you starting that with a 3-month-old baby. Do you want to talk a little bit about, I guess, the 5 years before Global Sisters and what you were doing and how you even came to starting a tech company with a 3-month-old baby? How does that happen?
I'm still wondering to myself. So I found myself a single mum with a single or sole parent without any warning. I was married to someone who had quite severe mental health issues, challenges. So he was actually on a disability pension because he was quite in quite a bad way. So he had bipolar, PTSD, borderline personality disorder, and just before this event happened, he was diagnosed as schizophrenic. So it was an interesting time anyway. It was a rocky time, challenging time. But apart from that, when he was well, he was really well. We were very happy. So the day, one day my little one was not quite 3 months old, and we went out for lunch, just the baby and I with my aunt. And my husband rang while we were at lunch and said, what time will you be home? And so I went and picked up my 11-year-old from school, got home at about 3:30, and my 11-year-old walked in first and started screaming, we've been robbed. So we hadn't actually been robbed. My husband was having a psychotic episode and had started to believe that I was the devil reincarnated, and he emptied out my house and my bank account. And because I wasn't working, I didn't have any income. So it was a very, very, very stressful time. I was really amazingly lucky to have so many friends support me and the boys, and also my aunt, 2 elderly aunts. One was a pensioner living in and she still is in public housing. And my other aunt were actually buying my groceries and nappies and, basically getting us through that period of time in between having any money at all and starting to get some welfare benefits. So it was a really challenging time. And in that time, my little baby got really sick and rushed to hospital in an ambulance, Alexander. And when we got to the hospital, they were asking me how many wet nappies he'd had the previous day to see if he was hydrated. And they were asking me a lot of questions, and I should have probably known the answers, but I didn't, because I was already sleep deprived, stressed, going through a crisis. But I think if you ask any mum with a 3-month-old baby what's going on, and they're sleep deprived, they're stressed, I don't think it was an unusual situation that I was in.
Well,
but there was that. But I think most mums with a newborn would be sleep deprived, don't know how many nappies, I have no idea.
Yeah.
And my sister's a midwife, and she was with me at the hospital, and I looked at her and said, I used to write all this down when Jacob was a baby because there were no apps, and we were lucky to have a computer back in the year 2000. But this time around, I assumed there'd be an app, and my sister, who works at Gosford Public Hospital, large hospital in the maternity ward, just said, well, no, I haven't seen anything like that, like what you're describing. So I started doing some research, and look, I think it's like a lot of businesses, they're developed on the back of either a traumatic event, or they're developed on the back of when you have a baby and you start to look for something and you can't find it, or perhaps, I know one of our amazing sisters is a death doula because she had to go through the process of helping, organise things, end-of-life things, and realise there was no one out there doing that level of support. So this was just the same, really. I just saw an opportunity and decided to have a crack. And that's when that steep learning curve really kicked in. But I think it was probably one of the silver linings that came out of a really bad situation. And I treated it that way from day one, like this is an opportunity now to make a difference, not just in my life, but in all of these other mums' lives. And I'd actually had postnatal depression when I had my first son. And I used to find writing everything down, his sleep times, his nappies. I used to make graphs. And I found that actually helped me feel like I had some level of control. And so when I created the app, I did it thinking it would also help those new parents and carers who like to keep track and who like to feel like, they've got some level of control. And I think it did that to an extent.
I think that's like so much of building a business is about what you're offering, but then that why does it matter? And I know for me, with both my girls, it is having that sense of control in a chaotic environment. And if you can give that to a mother or parent, that is such a valuable business offering. It's not the ability for an app to track that, it's more what you're giving them in that moment, and something they can pick up, they're on it anyway, and just feeling like they have that sense of control with this baby they have no control over, let's be honest.
There's no manual, there's no book that comes with the baby, that's sure. And so because I had no money at all, I found once I developed the app in partnership with. So when
can you just go back? So when you say you had no money, so you're sitting in your room, or you're sitting in your house, or you're sitting in somebody else's house, I don't know where you were at that point, and you've got ideas swirling. How do you get from like that concept to literally the first, because at some point you have to put an investment into it. So how did that process happen for you?
So I went out, so I used to work in the tourism industry, and I contacted someone who I knew developed websites, and not realizing back then how different a website and an app are. They're completely different things, but back then I didn't know. And so I contacted him and said, look, could you give me a quote? This is what I'm thinking. I'd already started drawing it up. What from a function perspective, this is what it needs to do. these are the problems it needs to solve.
Yeah.
And he gave me a quote, and I just went, I can't do it. But he knew me personally, and he said, look, Tara, I really believe in this concept too. Would you be interested in a partnership?
Oh, wow.
So his company developed the original app, and I did all the work around it. So all the partnership work, all the marketing, anything that was time-based, I did.
Yeah.
And then I paid him back over, I think it was 2 years.
Yeah.
So that's how I managed to get it off the ground. But having said that, marketing also costs a lot of money.
Yeah.
And having no money actually really forced me to be quite, I don't want to call myself innovative, but yeah, I guess you like innovative in terms of partnerships. And so, I really put myself out there, because I'm not someone who likes going to events, which surprises people because I tend to look confident, but I still say I'm 48 years old and I still don't like walking into a room full of people on my own. I still don't.
Yeah.
And so I really forced myself to step outside my comfort zone, and I'd go to these events and meet people, and I'd actively make sure like I was using the space, because I had a babysitter or I had a friend looking after the baby, and so I had to make sure this was a worthwhile experience. And that's when I met some girls who are now amazing friends, are people I met 8 years ago when they was just starting their businesses. So people like Tina Harris, who has Lala's Big Live Band that a lot of the mums will know. Tina and I met before she started and before I really launched.
Wow.
And so we've been each other's advocate the whole, and mentor, and we worked together the whole way over the last 8 years. And there are a lot of women like that I met back then that are now, some of them internationally amazing, some of them nationally, some of them no longer in business because they chose a different path.
Yeah.
But it made me become quite innovative in the way that I did marketing, and just did lots and lots and lots of partnerships where I marketed them and they marketed me. And together we grew and we grew and we grew, and it worked because none of us, it didn't cost any money. And having someone else talk about your business or refer you your business is much better than you doing it yourself, because it's not salesy. And so that was how we all grew together. It was a really, really fun time, actually, looking back on it.
Yeah, like I just think you have an amazing ability, and part of your story is to draw on the resources. So even when you started the app, going to someone you knew in a formal world and life and going, oh, that person might be able to help me with this. And then, oh, I'm going to throw myself out there and meet these people, they might be able to. So being able to kind of look around you and see, okay, what doesn't cost money, but what's a resource I can use here. Was there anything you learned, like in that process of doing partnerships, like that stuff that doesn't work and does work? Any top tips?
Yeah, the business partnership was probably my greatest failure to date. It was because I just didn't have the money up front to do it properly legally.
Okay.
And so he ended up owning half of my business.
Yeah.
And even though apart from that very beginning, when he helped build the app, he didn't do anything else in those 2 years. But then when I got a deal with Terry White Chemmart in Australia, and so he rightfully got 50% of that, which is the same time that I bought him out. So yeah, things like that. I massive, I guess a mistake, but I trust as well. I'm someone who trusts too soon. Remember my marriage story. So that was the biggest learning curve in terms of that. But the great things about the partnerships were that even the partners that I thought would be too big to want to be interested in what I was doing back in the early days, I just contacted them anyway. And so one of them was Jimbaroo.
Yep.
And I knew the girl who was the local owner of the local Jimbaroo in Newcastle. So she introduced me to their national marketing manager. And it just happened that they were about to launch an online, like a teaser Jimbaroo program to get mums watching it for free online, and then hopefully converting into a face-to-face membership. And so they were really keen to move into the online space, which I was in. And so they were really happy to promote my app to over 500,000 mums around Australia if I promoted their online program to all of my database, which was growing. And so that was one of the biggest wins, definitely. Wow. And then the Terry White partnership was another really big win. So I guess the lesson there is, don't ever think that companies are too big, even though you're a micro business or a small business. They're not too big. When I went to Terry White, I had something they wanted, and it would have cost them 5 times as much to build their own, and 5 times as long to build their own as what I gave them, their own branded version of the Baby Diaries app. Wow. And so they basically paid an annual license fee to use my IP, my app, with their brand all over it. And so, you know, that was another big lesson. Like, don't be afraid to contact the chairman or the CEO of a national company, because they have to respond. And if you do it in a way that's not salesy and it's just like a conversation, and but it's also not like you're not putting your hand out, you're actually offering something of value to them. It's a true partnership.
And so I guess for you launch this business, it starts to get momentum, it's all exciting, you're building these partnerships, a year or 2 or 3 down the track, how did you keep momentum going? How did you feel like you were having success in your business over time?
Yeah, that was when, so I launched internationally 2 years ago. So I went over, I was introduced to a fellow called Graham Grasby, who I met through Tina Harris, Lala, because he was her licensing agent, and she introduced me to him. Now, he was the guy who took the Wiggles to the States and made them massive. And he took Bananas in Pajamas to the States. And he saw my app, because by this point I had another app for pets, and he saw them as a licensing opportunity over there. And so he introduced me to all of his networks in the States. He's very well known over there. And so that was pretty much, again, it was just on the back of putting myself out there and then taking the risk and going overseas, doing all of the research around, you know, the Australian government has a lot of funding for businesses that want to export. And so I was able to get funding to go overseas, and it just kept growing it that way. And then, to be honest with you, what happened next was that I got quite bored with it. And
classic
so
entrepreneur, classic.
I got really bored, and I felt like I'd actually taken it as far as I could. And I think the other thing too was that my little boy wasn't a baby anymore, and I was still working in the baby space. And so what I did was last year started looking to sell or license the business, and I've been really fortunate to license it for on a 5-year license. Hopefully that'll be a 10-year license to Stacey Gadway, who has 2 little babies, and she is a marketing person, and she's now taking those businesses and reinvigorating them and doing some great things. So yeah, it's good.
That's great. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I have so many questions, but I'm conscious of time. But I guess, do you have, or have you developed, or do you have any philosophies? Do you have a life philosophy or a business philosophy that you found sort of sticks with you has through your life, or you've developed it over time?
I think self-belief is a biggie. So my childhood certainly wasn't one of wealth. I came from quite low socio-demographic background, and I was forced to leave school when I was 16 so that I could earn money to bring home to my parents, my family, and so I didn't go to uni till I was in my 20s. And I really didn't have a very strong sense of self or self-belief, and that's something that I've developed over the last probably 20 years. And because when you launch a business, it's big and it's scary and it's a roller coaster. It's actually a roller coaster. It's like some days it's so amazing. It's like, I can't believe I haven't done this earlier. And then other days you just struggle to get out of bed. And so definitely having that self-belief, definitely knowing why you're doing it and keeping that somewhere really visible, right. So that you can keep coming back to it. And surrounding yourself with people who believe in you too. So making sure you've got that tribe of people who lift you up, who you can be honest with and transparent with, I don't have, like you, Mel, we don't have trouble with vulnerability or honesty. It's sort of who we are, but a lot of people do. And so it's really good to make sure you're surrounded by your tribe during those periods. But yeah, and share your story like this, you know. I think that I know, having told this story a few times over the years, that I started a business with no money, a 3-month-old baby, and no tech skills. It can, you know, honest to God, if I can do this, anyone can do this. Like, I literally had no tech skills at all, and no money. So yeah, that's, I guess, part of it too. Values is the other one, is making sure that you only do business with businesses that are values aligned, or people that are values aligned, that your partnerships are based in value alignment. For me, the values stuff is massive. And making sure that whatever we do, you know, that we remember that at the end of our days, it's the time with our family and friends that we'll remember. So making sure that fits in.
I personally will be the first person to buy your book when you publish it. So
yeah, right.
I'm on the waiting list. So my final question, often people say, what would you say to your younger self? Or that's quite a question that's asked a bit, and it's a good one to reflect on. I like to ask people, who is 90-year-old Tara? What life has she lived? What is she proud of?
So prior to the Baby Diaries, I was working with a charity for almost a decade, and now I'm working with Global Sisters, and then in between that was creating that app. So hopefully to help women get through those, particularly the first year. So for me, I just want to look back. So for success to me is to be able to look back and feel like I made a difference.
Yeah.
And you know, it's not about the money or any of those things. It's about, you know, I definitely want to have traveled a lot, and I have been really fortunate. Want to travel a lot more, but ultimately look back and feel like I was a good role model to my boys.
Yeah.
And that I made a difference in the world. So
I have no doubt that you've already done that. So you've made a difference in my world just by being my colleague. So awesome. And thank you for even taking the time. This was a very last minute. We had somebody cancel last minute who was lined up for tonight. So Tara, the jack of all trades, the problem solver, the fixer, jumped in and has done this call very last minute today. So I really appreciate you, and thank you for sharing your story. And I'm sure there'll be many sisters who hear this and feel inspired and even get really practical tips for themselves and their businesses. So thank you.
My pleasure.
I'm going to stop.